Hello everyone, greetings to all watching the video. I welcome you all to another episode of Convo with Apricus. Friends, our topic of the discussion today is existentialism. And to throw light on this topic, we have Dr. MP Terence Samuel with us. Dr. Samuel is Assistant Professor in the Department of Philosophy and Comparative Religion in Shantiniketan, Vishva-Bharti, Shantiniketan in West Bengal, India. He has more than 15 years of experience in teaching and research. He is also our member of editorial board in Indian Journal of Ethics, Logic and Philosophy. Welcome, sir. Welcome to Convo with Apricus. We shall start the discussion now with the first question. Sir, I want to know, how do you see existentialism in Indian philosophy?
For this question, first of all, I thank Apricus for giving me this opportunity to share my views on existentialism. And regarding your this question, how do you see existentialism in Indian philosophy? Before that, we need to clarify ourselves as to what we mean by existentialism and whether the aspects of existentialism can be seen in the Indian philosophy, as you asked. So I need to first clarify what existentialism is. Existentialism is a philosophical tradition of the West in the 19th and 20th century. And there were many different existentialist philosophers, but all of them do not have the similar ideas. Their ideas actually differ. So it's not easy to find out very common notions among them, but we can find certain elements which are very, very much similar. And so on the basis of the similarity among their thinkings and thought patterns, we can say that there are certain elements which can be found as common to all existentialist philosophers. And the existentialism as a school of thought actually emerged, as I said, during the period of modernity. And as a response to the crisis of modernity, it emerged. That is the first thing that we need to have in mind. And the second thing is that it developed as a response to the problem of the meaning of human existence. Before the modern period, actually, the meaning of the human existence was actually, in a sense, it was given much weightage. This theocentrism was given much weightage. And so the meaning of the human existence was defined in terms of theocentrism. However, when we come into modern period, when the science, rationality, and objectivity and all these things gained much importance and significance in philosophical thinking, then this existentialism actually came as a response to the changing trends within the modernity, changing aspects from the pre-modern traditions and the modernity. And this word was first used by Gabriel Marcel for certain themes which are explicitly written by Jean-Paul Sartre and Simone de Beauvoir. This is the first time that word existentialism was used. And when we come to the common threads in the existentialist school of thought, we can find out certain common threads like this, that they gave more importance to the being than the being. That means that one is, an individual is always constantly in the process of becoming, rather than living according to the pre-assigned or predetermined meanings of or essence of life. And the second aspect which we find, which is common to almost all the existentialist thinkers, starting from Kierkegaard, is that Kierkegaard introduced this notion of anxiety. Anxiety is an important element within this existentialist thinking, in the sense that anxiety was considered not as a negative issue, as a kind of a positive aspect, which actually leads to the freedom of choice and we can say a sense of authentic existence also. So it was considered as a positive aspect rather than a negative aspect by the existentialist thinkers mostly. And above all, the notion of freedom was also given more importance in assigning meaning to one's own life. For example, the existentialist will say that I am the incontestable author of my own life. So, but they consider that human action is unfree as long as it is conditioned by certain external factors or by others. So in that sense, they gave more importance to the notion of freedom also. And moreover, when we come to the philosophy of Heidegger and Sartre, they gave more importance to the aspect of death in human life and how it actually gives a finishing to the unfinished aspects of human existence. So in that sense, there are many different aspects which come under this umbrella term of existentialism, which have been discussed widely by different existentialist philosophers. And as you asked the question that how do you see existentialism in Indian philosophy? Assuming that you mean Indian philosophy with the popular understanding of Astic and Nastic traditions, we can safely say that as these philosophical schools existed in different periods of time, responding to different problems, human issues, we may not find existentialism in Indian philosophy. Rather, we may find certain themes. We may have certain, themes which can be compared in these two different schools of thought. However, if we take Indian philosophy to be inclusive of different the philosophical traditions in different languages, regions, and religions, and all these things, if we take into consideration, then certain aspects in Bhakti philosophy can be compared with the existentialist notions like anxiety, the meaning of human existence, and all these things. But when we come to modern period, we may find many people, many philosophers, those whose writings have very closer similarities, very closer affinities to these notions of existentialism. There are many such works on this. For example, even the works of Rabindranath Tagore, people have tried to find out the existentialist elements within the writings of Rabindranath Tagore also. However, in the modern period, we find this existentialism in the fictions and the literatures of the modern poets, Indian poets, as well as dramatists and theatrists also. This is what I can say for this question. I hope I answered this question well.
Thank you, sir. Sir, how do you see existentialism being treated as opposed to positivism and rationalism?
Yeah, this is another interesting question. And these two schools, um, especially positivism, was very famous during the modern period. And the rationalism was there from the 16th century onwards, we find this. And positivism gave importance to the reason and logic from sensory experiences. And they gave more importance to the objective proof of knowledge. And in that sense, they were giving more importance to the objectivity rather than the subjectivity of the human subject. This is a very important thing about positivism. And I don't want to, I cannot explain all these different aspects of positivism. Anyhow, I'm trying to locate the main issue, main aspect of this positivism. And when we come to rationalism, rationalism regards reason as the chief source of knowledge. However, existentialism differs from these two schools of philosophy in the sense that existentialism gave importance to the subjectivity, the human subjective aspects. They were given prominence in the in existentialism. In the case of as a kind of opposition to rationalism, existentialist philosophers will say that human choices are always not rational. Rather, humans choose their choices most of the times irrationally. So there was a book also on irrational man. So based on this existentialist philosophy, so they in a sense they are opposed to these two different schools of philosophy, and especially Kierkegaard will highly attack Hegelian the rationality also. To say some more words about this issue, Sartre would say, the Jean-Paul Sartre, the French existentialist philosopher, he will say that existence precedes essence. That is a famous quotation of Jean-Paul Sartre. What does it mean is that earlier, the human existence was conceived as something predetermined by God, or in a sense karma, or fate, or God's will. Such similar notions were there. And the humans were conceived in the sense, human life, human existence was conceived in the sense that the humans are the just executioners of these predetermined aspects or predetermined essence of their life. So this is the difference between this existentialism and the earlier pre-existentialist schools of thought. And moreover, Sartre would say that man first of all exists, encounters himself, and surges up in the world and defines himself afterwards. So in that sense, the existence comes earlier, and the essence of the human existence is actually the totality of different moments of human existence, and how we find certain coherence or the totality at the time of the death, where the death actually is a almost possibility for the human, as Heidegger would say. So in that sense, the essence a predetermined one. However, the existence actually help to define the essence of the human existence. So in that sense, it is opposed to both positivistic as well as rationalistic understanding of meaning or the self or the subject or the world also. So it is very different in that sense. Hope I made it clear.
Thank you, sir. Sir, how is this concept associated to religion?
This is, it is, in a sense, it is related and unrelated in both the existentialism, because there is a classification that existentialism is actually, there are two different kinds of existentialist philosophers. One group is called as theistic existentialist philosophers, and the other two kind of existentialist philosophers, they are called as atheistic philosophers. Among the theistic existentialist philosophers, in the Kierkegaard, Jaspers, and even we can include Fyodor Dostoevsky also. In the atheistic existentialism, we find Nietzsche, Heidegger, Sartre, and Simone de Beauvoir also. So there are two different types of existentialist philosophers. One group the idea of God, and another group did not have any kind of relation with the notion of God or religion. In the sense that for the atheistic existentialist, we can say that the German philosopher Nietzsche, what he was trying to say is that God is dead, so we have to create the meaning of life by ourselves, or we have to create the meaning of the earth. The humans have to create the meaning of the earth because the God is dead. So in that sense, it is not at all related with the religion, but it is negatively related with the religion. On the other hand, if we take the philosophy of Kierkegaard, he would suggest in the stages of existence, he would suggest that the leaping into faith is the ultimate stage of human existence, like that he will say. And here he will say that faith as a kind of a passionate inwardness towards an objective uncertainty of this world, or to prove the existence of God, we have always this objective uncertainty. But in order to overcome this, he would suggest faith as an important aspect. So in that sense, it is both related as well as not related with the religion or with the notion of God also.
Thank you, sir. Sir, I want to know how are existentialism and nihilism differentiated in Indian philosophy?
There are always this confusion among the philosophers whether they would treat existentialism as a kind of nihilism, because they would suggest normally those who say that, for example, when they talk about Nietzsche's philosophy, they would say that Nietzschean philosophy is a kind of nihilism because he is negating the metaphysical aspects, or the negation of God, or in a sense, as this almost all the existentialist philosophers give importance to the notion of anxiety in human existence. So they try to understand this as a nihilistic philosophy, and they extend this by saying that existentialism is a kind of a moral nihilism, or epistemological nihilism, as it gave more importance to the analysis or to the understanding of death. Even they may say that there is an existential nihilism also here, because they talk more about death like that. So different kinds of nihilism different kinds of nihilism are attributed to existentialism. But these claims are not correct in the sense that even though these negations or these kinds of negations are discussed, but ultimately the existentialist will try to say that the absurdity of the world has to be encountered rather than getting into a kind of a nihilism or a kind of renunciation of life. So in that sense, they affirm the life. They are all affirmative of life, and whoever we take normally, whatever the existentialist philosopher may be, they affirm life in a different sense rather than in which it was really affirmed by the common people. So they may say even sometimes that the avoidance of the crowd or to avoid the merging with the day or the marketplace, like that Nietzsche will say. So these kinds of concepts are there, but they actually avoid these kind of a kind of herd morality, which Nietzsche would say. Rather, they would advocate for the affirmation of the individual human existence. In that sense, it is very interesting to note that Nietzsche even would say that, instead of the old law tables, we have to create new law tables like that. So when he says about the creation of new law tables, new moral values, or the revaluation of all the values like that, when he claims, naturally he affirms life rather than rather than denying the human existence. So it is not very much correct to say that existentialism is a kind of a nihilistic philosophy. Rather, it is an affirmative philosophy, we can say.
Thank you, sir. Sir, how does this concept influences outside philosophy?
This is also a very interesting question, actually. When I ask this question, I understand that even this French student movement during the 1960s actually was much influenced by the existential writings of Jean-Paul Sartre. And there were revolutionary movements, and the students' movements, they considered existentialism not as a fashion, but as a movement, even they considered. So, in a sense, it was considered as a kind of a revolutionary philosophy, which actually had a direct repercussions on certain political movements, even like that we find. When we look at the French student movements in the 1960s. More than that, we find this influence of existentialism mostly in art, literature, and theater. The creative fields actually had the impact of existentialism very much. We can find many artists, literary people, and the theatrists who were all much influenced by existentialist philosophy. Apart from this creative writing, there is we can find the influence of existentialism in psychoanalysis as well as psychotherapy also. So outside philosophy, it had so much influence. But ultimately, we need to understand one important thing, that even though the existentialism talks about the meaning of life and certain absurdities of human existence and other things, absurdities of the meaninglessness of the world or the human existence like that, we need to remind ourselves about what Herbert Marcuse said about existentialism also. What he would say is that existentialism, instead of finding out these absurdities in the historical conditions of human existence, they made these absurdities pushed into the ontology or on the individual themselves. So, in that sense, existentialism actually had a kind of the part of the ideology which we try to attack, like that Herbert Marcuse will say. So we need to, if we take into account all these things, then we can understand that it has its influences outside philosophy. However, there is one interesting thing, as Herbert Marcuse says, that it has somehow or other accepted or legitimized the dominant ideologies of its time and passed these kinds of ideologies onto human existence or ontological things.
Thank you, sir. I'm so thankful that you came here, took part in the discussion, and explained the topic in such a lucid manner. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you.